There, boom, cooling loop installed. Today we're taking apart a Tcase because I had the vampire issue for a 1995 H1 Hummer with 6.5 naturally aspirated engine. My issue upon opening this, and you probably can't see it this light, here's a cooling loop. I have the older style cooling loop, found out. Anyway, on the older styles, they were installed at the factory wrong, AM General, not GM. They were installed at the factory wrong. I believed it was they were torqued, and it would cause stress to one of these two joints. And in my case, mine, once it got too much heat from a drive, ended up cracking, and you're not gonna see it. There's a hair crack right at the tip, right there. It goes all the way down there. What happens is, the way the transmission Tcase works in terms of cooling, the fluid goes through the transmission and it comes into this cooling loop and it goes through here. When the Tcase is running cool, your transmission is usually going to be running hot because you're not using your Tcase as much. So in here, the fluid, staying contained, goes through here, cools off a little bit and goes whoop, right back out into your transmission. And then the alternate is true. When you're off-roading, you're using your Tcase more, you're using glow lock, anything like that. This is hotter and your transmission is cooler. The fluid goes through here. This helps to cool the Tcase. Pretty neat idea. This is the only real problem where not installed correctly, torqued the wrong way, it causes stress, and eventually too much heat builds up and causes this little guy to fracture. So what happens is this fluid, which is supposed to be coming through here, all happy and self-contained, instead of coming through, starts dumping into all of the fluid that's supposed to be passing through into the Tcase. When that happens, this overflows, which is supposed to be 2.5 liters. There's an air port here, so air can come in and out, as it fluctuates. Heat and everything causes things to expand and contract. What would happen is it would start transporting transmission fluid out. Well, where do you think an air port goes? It goes into your air filter, so you can get transmission fluid into your air filter. You can get transmission fluid into your geared hubs as it starts following the lines that go to all the airports in every part of the vehicle. So you'd get transmission fluid in all the places where you don't want it, and this would overflow. So what we're doing to the transfer case is we're rebuilding it. You see on this side, these gears, they don't have any kind of broken teeth. They have normal wear. Everything is spinning and turning as it's supposed to. There was not a lot of metal in the Tcase when I opened it up, so that was good. There was just a little bit, but not much. We're worried that some of the stuff could have melted off and gotten into the bearings and seals. So that would cause the bearings to wear premature. What we're gonna do, we're gonna replace the cooling loop. That's the main thing that's broken. We'll go through and see if anything else is broken. I doubt it. We're going to replace all the bearings and all the seals. And I am not a mechanic, never done this before, but the one thing that you should have, your entire service manual. That will be your guide. It's like your Bible. Let's get this done. I think this will go well. It's like Legos, big Legos. Step one is that we gotta take off the yoke, and boom, yoke's done. All right, next is we need to take off the rear extension on the rear facing side of the Tcase, which is what I'm holding in my right hand right there. And I found out it is a 15mm bolts that are holding these guys on. I'm assuming they're gonna be kind of tight. And so we're gonna put this on with a little bit of a nice short extent, well, it's kind of longer. We're gonna take these off. Let's see if I can do this. I already took apart the Tcase. I took it apart in half. That was easy. The yoke was easy to get off too. Let's get this done. Once you get the 15mm bolts out, you just give it a love tap with a rubber mallet. I read in there in this manual, it said to find just a soft tip, just anything to put in the edge. Give it a tap. I just gave it a nice tap and magically it came off. So we're just gonna pull it off. And now we have, what is this called? This is the main shaft. The main shaft's right there, it's right there, it turns everything, it's very important. Because it's very important, let's try not to put it on the concrete too much. more than we have to. The next step is we're taking off that, which looks kind of daunting, the rear bearing retainer, which goes over the main shaft, which is right here. So my guess, these are probably, again, well, these look a little bigger. We got these bolts out of the rear bearing retainer. Bolt out, there are 4, they're all right here. They were 15 millimeters. And as you can see, I already gave it a love tap, so it's already started. I might need a screwdriver, I'm not sure, to help pry it the rest of the way off. But it looks like I should be able to wiggle and jiggle it and get it off. And then we got to worry about the main shaft. It shows lots of snap rings and tone wheels and more snap rings, and pretty much this entire thing is just a whole bunch of snap rings from everything I've read. In further investigation, there is a snap ring hidden right here. We got to take this guy off to pull this unit off. Okay, once you get this cover off, the rear bearing cover, then we get down here, there is a snap ring that will be right in front of this tone wheel, which is what that's called, or this is called. So as you can see, I've already pulled off the snap ring, so it's got a little bit of movement, a little bit of play. I don't think it's gonna come off immediately though. And there's a snap ring right behind it as well, which we have to get off. Next up, I'm on 5136. You see how they take off the rear half of the case, separate from front half, and the front half has all the guts. So I've put it all sort of back together. I've already taken off the rear half, but I want you to be able to see how I take it off. Camera there for a second. All right, so this has the oil pump on it. It slides off once you get that last snap ring, and it just comes up like this. And so you have the front half, and okay, in here is there, that comes out pretty fast. And then there's this guy where the oil pump goes on, so it circulates the fluid inside the Tcase. So rear half is over there, front half is now here. Just remember, it's one big Lego, people. Just a Lego. Keep telling yourself that. It's just a Lego. So I just took out the rear bearing and the rear bearing housing, and I can actually feel it hanging up, and I don't know if you can hear it, but you can hear it catching on crud that's on the inside of there. It also had a little bit of it, crud, just sitting on the outside of the bearing. So I'm glad we're replacing the rear bearing. That probably would have failed at some point and started making wonderful noise, sounds, and probably causing damage. That's done. I'm gonna clean out the inside of this. Just put a little bit of oil, transmission oil, of course, to lubricate it up a little bit to press in the new bearing. I just seated the new bearing. It's wonderful. It goes around nice and smooth. Use a bearing tool and a hammer. Takes some work, but not easy, but not tough. You guys can do it. Just took out the rear bushing extension. You can see it's kind of torn up. Just take a hammer. As long as you don't damage the rear housing, I don't think it's a problem. So this is the old one. There's the new one, and I'm just gonna really carefully and lightly tap this in with a rubber mallet. Be careful, obviously this is aluminum or something like that, so we want to damage it like we did when we're taking it out, which doesn't matter, but putting it in, you need to be gentle. Boom, new one in. As you can see, it's nice and flush, it's not damaged. Actually, I just took this wonderful press guy, I pushed it right down on top. I don't want to do it again because I don't want to push on this rubber too many times, and I used a rubber mallet and just gently tapped it in. It went right in there pretty easily. I mean, you can't wiggle it out or anything like that. You can't force it out by hand, but it's in there, so that worked. Okay, removing the cooling loop. So first we take the bolts off down here, loosen them up. They weren't that difficult. And the cooling loop has a couple other aspects to get it up. Okay, let's put these bolts to the side. And we'll see how, you can see that just kind of sits right in there. So I'm gonna wiggle it, jiggle it, see if I can pull this out on camera. Alright, since it was broken anyway. However, we torqued it enough, you can now see how bad the crack was. I don't even think it was from my torquing it that did this, but you see that right there? That is where all the fluid came out and went into my Tcase. That crack right there. It's pretty cool actually. That's not good, but it's pretty cool to actually see it. So we know what it looks like. Alright, so we're going to replace it and not manhandle it like we just did this one. And we also have to replace that bearing right there. The shifting fork, it says in here to remove the shift rail followed by the mode fork assembly. Shift rail, mode fork assembly. Alright, so I've already got this started because it took a little bit to figure it out, but you can turn with a wrench the shifting fork itself. But this little knob that sticks out right there is sticking in right there, and I noticed that there was just enough space to pull it up by shifting a little bit without really having to do anything to hurt it. And so that comes right up. If I remember right, because I had to take this apart and do it again twice to figure it out. I'm gonna move this down. Then, here we go again. Okay, I'm gonna hold the camera kind of funky. Pull up this fork here. Got the shift fork out, assembly. I'm just gonna say you just wiggle it a whole bunch and eventually you get it out. And it looks like this. It sits in there like so. You just wiggle, and you pull it out. It's not that easy, but it does come apart in two pieces. Let me set it down right here. You can see my coffee and everything sitting around me. You see how I'm pulling that right there? That whole section that's moving comes off. So I took that off first, and then this just, the lower portion just slid right off. I'm holding it all together with my hand. I took it apart already, so you can see how it comes off without me struggling to get it. The last bit that you need to do is this bearing would typically be seated down right there. There's a snap ring that goes right above this bearing. I already took it off, and it'd probably be helpful to put your hand under this. It's pretty heavy though. You pull out this whole gearing out of the inside. I'll set that right there. This bearing, you'd pop this out, replace that, and you have the entire half. This bearing, I already installed it. That's all good. And that output seal, that's already installed. So really, this bearing's the last one. Down at the very bottom here, there's a bearing. Gotta figure out how to take that out and replace that. Anyway, almost done with the replacing of bearings. So it's pretty cool. On the differential assembly, which is this guy, which was sitting right in here, there's a snap ring. Whoop. If I can grab it, already popped it off. Then I'm guessing that, oh, all right, let's work this off. I think we can do this together. Okay, get this out, be nice and careful, set that on a clean paper towel. All right, so looking in there, and we'll set this aside, and look back over here. We're getting closer. You gotta figure out how to get this guy out still. So figured out how to get that little bitty bearing out of here. It's you just need some kind of long punch with not a pointy end. Just put it down there and gently give it a couple taps, and boop, right out it comes. So there it is, and we have a replacement for this. As you can see, there's kind of some crud in there. We're gonna clean this guy up because this is going back in. Clean this up, put in a new bearing, and then we start the assembly process. We actually have all the bearings done. And the very last thing I'll show you is the cooling loop, which will go here. So here's where the cooling loop goes. And the new cooling loop has a blue band, there we go, on it, right here. That'll tell you that's the new one, circa 2001. Anyway, you just take that band off. These are on here to protect it. Now this bracket is what keeps your cooling loop from not being twisted when you're tightening it from the other side, from the outside. Because what would usually happen is as you would turn it, and you don't really torque it, but as you turn it and tighten it, it would twist this area or this area just enough to create a hairline crack, or to weaken it so that later heat buildup would crack it, finish it, and there goes the vampire and your Tcase and whatever else. This is how it comes, and this is how it goes in, except for this guy, and this guy. These all stay on. These little O-rings with a washer on it. It's pretty cool. I'm just gonna leave those little rubber stoppers in on there as I put this in, just to protect the ends. I don't want them bumping around. Gently let that go in, and then line this guy up to lock that in. That's fine. Don't push or pull on this. We're just gonna let it sit there and do what it wants to do. Everything else on here is good. There, boom, cooling loop installed.